LA staff is scrambling to bury the tape, but the internet already caught fire and it is spreading fast. Big Diesel reportedly trapped King James in the tunnel following that brutal New York defeat, sparking a confrontation that nearly shattered the peace. Look, I just need everyone to grasp that surviving 82 games in the Golden Era wasn't even the same sport as today's schedule. Word from the inner circle suggests this whole blowout happened in the blink of an eye. The moment the clock hit 0, O'Neal was already stationed in the hallway, an immovable mountain blocking the exit. He unleashed a single, lethal inquiry that left the entire traveling party paralyzed. Rob Pelinka was losing his mind, desperately trying to prevent a collision between these two titans. That is when the realization hit James. His digital rants hadn't just gone viral. They had poked the bear, the only man with enough weight and hardware to actually dismantle his reputation. Once you hear the words that left Shaq's mouth, you'll see why the locker room is whispering about a permanent rift. The big Aristotle dropped a truth bomb that sent shockwaves through LeBron's inner camp. Sources are already painting this as the day the myth of LeBron's invincibility finally cracked. If that audio clip seemed chaotic, the footage the Lakers are burying is pure insanity. A night meant for legends turned into a total collapse. It was a public unraveling under the most unforgiving spotlights in the world. February 1st, 2026. At the Garden, the Lakers got dismantled, 112-100, and the gap felt even wider. Anunoby and Shamet were carving through the lane like they were playing against statues. Luka Doncic cruised to 30 points with effortless grace, while James finished with 22. Truth be told, he looked every bit of 41 years old, lacking that signature explosive burst. Following the final whistle, LeBron stepped into the Garden corridor, likely rehearsing his next media talking point, only to find O'Neal looming over the concrete like a gargoyle. This wasn't some playful segment for the cameras. This was 325 pounds of pure, unadulterated 90s intimidation. That raw, physical energy from the old guard was cutting off the exit. The atmosphere turned cold instantly. The silence of a losing locker room transformed into a high-voltage standoff that felt ready to explode. There was no laughter or big fella charm in his eyes. He locked eyes with LeBron and asked, "How can you call this era tough when looking at someone sideways earns you a whistle?" James tried to counter with his usual logic, breaking down the analytics of the modern high-speed game. But Shaq shut that narrative down before it could even breathe. Speed is irrelevant when the league treats players like they're made of glass. You only lean on pace because you're hiding the fact that you're playing in a pillow-soft league, he barked. Reports say Shaq started naming names Davis and Embiid, mocking the frequent absences of today's superstars. He reminded everyone that, in his prime, you stayed on the hardwood regardless of the pain. He laughed at the idea of taking weeks off for a bruise and flat out told LeBron his latest opinions were pure fantasy. Words weren't enough anymore. Security had to physically wedge themselves between the two icons. Lakers executives were desperately trying to steer a 7-foot human tank away from their superstar as onlookers watched in disbelief. It felt like a cinematic climax that nobody in the building was prepared to see. What makes this confrontation so loud is that the historical data actually backs up the big man. When you examine the brutality of the foul counts, Shaq's perspective starts looking like an undeniable reality. The 90s weren't just about flashy dunks and highlight reels. The statistics prove it was a war zone, essentially a different brand of basketball entirely. But to truly understand why O'Neal finally lost his cool in that hallway, you have to see what he represents. He is the final sentinel connecting two worlds, having survived the most violent era of the game. He entered the league in 1992, trading blows with 80s enforcers who treated the paint like a back alley brawl. He witnessed the sport transform from a blood sport in the post to a protected game on the outside. He saw hand-checking vanish in 2004 and watched as the rulebook became a shield for scorers. He watched as defenders shifted from being brutal enforcers to timid souls terrified of being ejected for simple contact. The court just kept expanding, Sharpshooters drifted further toward the perimeter, and that interior paint area stopped feeling like a lethal combat zone. So when he hears the king claim the modern era is tougher to Shaq, it feels like a slap to every icon who bled for a layup. Shaq hates that speed myth. LeBron highlights a faster tempo in today's game, yet the raw historical data paints a completely different picture for the fans. During the 1984-85 campaign, the league's average rhythm hit 102. The following season, it remained at that identical 102 mark. Fast forward to 2026, and the league's pace hovers around 99.5. We are actually moving slower than various stretches of the mid-80s. Consider those 1984 Nuggets running at a blistering 107 pace. That breakneck speed would drain most modern rosters before the final frame even began. The Showtime Lakers were consistently pushing past 102, and they maintained that velocity while enduring a gauntlet of jersey-tugging, elbows, and floor-pounding collisions on every single possession down the hardwood. No officiating safety net or freedom of movement rule protected you then. It was gladiatorial survival. If you want hard, go analyze the Jordan rules. The Detroit Pistons didn't just shadow Michael. They crafted a tactical torture chamber designed to punish his body every single time he attacked the rim. Whenever Michael dared to drive into the lane, he was guaranteed to end up tasting the hardwood. No automatic flagrant reviews or long pauses at the monitors existed. It was just raw physicality and a quick inbound. Compare that to superstar life in 2026. LeBron reportedly invests over $1 million annually just to keep his physical machine from breaking down or showing signs of aging. From freezing cryo chambers and pressurized oxygen tanks to gourmet personal chefs and private jets with full-sized beds for mid-air recovery, that is top-tier elite luxury. But in the 80s, icons like Barkley and Magic Johnson were flying coach, squeezing into standard seats and still dominating through massive minutes the next evening. Shaq laid it out straight for everyone to hear back in April of 2025. LeBron's incredible career longevity is simply a direct byproduct of competing in an era that has gone incredibly soft. It lacks the old grit and grind, something he has bypassed his entire career. He never faced that violence. So, that lack of physicality definitely pads his stats. Those specific words didn't just land, they echoed across the entire basketball landscape for a very good reason. From O'Neal's perspective, if modern elites faced nightly wars against bruisers like Rick Mahorn, while enduring grueling commercial travel without luxury recovery, legacies would look drastically different. Even his heiress, Michael Jordan, decided to weigh in on the matter back in June of 2025. He questioned the competitive fire of today's stars and mourned the days when players took immense pride in suiting up every single night. That raw, unyielding hunger for the battle and that type of elite competitiveness is exactly what I live for. I deeply miss that specific warlike atmosphere of the sport. Michael completed all 82 games across 9 separate and grueling seasons. Kobe Bryant famously ignored shattered bones just to stay on the court. That ironclad willpower is what actually forged those timeless legends. Modern franchises are far more cautious now. A slight twitch or minor ache leads to an immediate night off. Sports science labels it career longevity. The old guard calls it a lack of toughness. This fundamental divide is exactly why the firestorm surrounding this debate never truly dies down. It is also the reason Shaq's Netflix power rankings from earlier this year felt so pointed and deeply personal to the community. In his ultimate top 10 list, MJ took the crown, Kobe claimed the second spot, and James was relegated to number 3. For the third spot, I am going with the king. At number 2, I am picking the late, great Kobe Bean Bryant. But the undisputed greatest player of all time is Michael Jordan. For the big Aristotle, the final verdict was perfectly clear. It all comes down to having that Predator's heartbeat. Jordan never needed a digital platform or podcast to explain how difficult his path was. He proved it by crushing whoever stood in his way. While LeBron debates evolution, voices like Paul Pierce insist the math doesn't match the narrative. The real catalyst for Shaq's outburst in that hallway goes much deeper than simple box scores or all-time rankings. For those icons who bled to build the league's global brand, respect is the ultimate and only currency that matters. To Shaq, James lacks one crucial element that no amount of training, money, or science can provide: the genuine fear factor. That chilling presence that rattles an opponent's soul before the tip even happens. Shaq's been banging that drum all through 2025 and 2026. In that tunnel, his frustration finally boiled over. He told the world that nobody is actually terrified of going up against LeBron. "I never felt that opponents truly dreaded James the way they panicked over Jordan. I have never heard anyone confess to being afraid of him." That single statement set the digital world on fire because while the world respects LeBron's hardware, the respect for his aura is different. His statistical resume is absolutely untouchable. But causing genuine terror in the hearts of your enemies? That is a whole different ballgame. Rivals weren't staring at their ceilings at 3 a.m., dreading his arrival. They weren't bracing for a psychological and physical nightmare. Facing MJ or Kobe felt like staring down a hurricane. You knew they were coming to strip away your dignity and your pride. It wasn't just about a loss. It was about public humiliation on national television and having your competitive spirit dismantled before a sold-out crowd. That savagery was relentless. It was pure combat every single night. Now witness the shift. That ice-cold hunger has dissolved into a cozy, friendly podcast-style brotherhood. LeBron's filming shows with Tyrese, laughing and lounging like they're on a mid-season vacation. Bonding is fine, but it's a far cry from that 90s edge. Shaq's list felt like an official decree. Mike first, Kobe second, LeBron third. His tone left absolutely zero room for any counter-arguments. Shaq flanked Kobe and battled Jordan. He witnessed that psychopathic competitive switch firsthand. His point was blunt. For one life-saving bucket, you call the Mamba, not a 41-year-old media mogul. Think the 90s were clunky? Revisit that 1989 Pistons vs. Bulls war. Laimbeer, Mahorn, Oakley, those guys weren't playing defense, they were headhunting. Every possession was a physical toll. Driving the lane meant tasting the hardwood. That was the standard. Larry Bird survived hits that would spark national outrages today. He still suited up the next night. No endless suspension debates or tedious replay delays. Just raw pride and grit. Then LeBron claims calf strains are the modern high ankle sprains. During my early years in the league, the biggest nightmare for any player was rolling a high ankle sprain. You were terrified to land on someone because the paint was a congested graveyard of bodies. One bad landing, and you're sidelined for 4 to 6 weeks of recovery. The open court changed that risk, but now the frantic pace targets the calves instead. He argues today's velocity makes minor tweaks just as devastating as the old-school hits. That specific take absolutely infuriated the retired legends. O'Neal absorbed constant punishment. Isaiah Thomas famously dropped 25 points on one leg in the 1988 finals. That's legendary history. When LeBron calls today's game harder, veterans hear a rewrite of their struggle. He even suggested 1980s defenders stood in the paint like unmoving statues. That stung considering he's talking about giants like Hakeem, David Robinson, and a young Shaq. Those weren't slow obstacles. They were elite freaks who dominated both ends. NBC recently asked Diesel for his ultimate starting five. He chose Mike, Kobe, Malone, Bird, and Hakeem. He was asked to confirm that precise lineup, Bean and Mike. That's the backcourt. Bird at the 3 and the mailman at the 4. Hakeem at center. You missed a huge name. Zero LeBron. He didn't even pick himself, proving he's dead serious about this list. When James was mentioned, Shaq barely flinched. The silence was deafening. To win it all, he wants assassins, not players distracted by media hype or podcast clips. O'Neal isn't alone. Paul Pierce went nuclear over those comments on his latest show. Danny Green tried to argue, but Pierce cut him off, dismissing the speed narrative. We fought through brutal screens just to stay in the play. Now they just switch and call it defense. Pierce says the speed exists only because contact is illegal. Whistles blow for every touch. Back then, reckless drives were met by Ben Wallace or KG at the summit. Careless layups carried a heavy price. This isn't just talk. Pierce and LeBron have history. Their feud peaked in that legendary 2008 Game 7 duel. That war was visceral, pure psychological combat. When legends trash LeBron's logic, it's more than a clip, it's a battle for the league's soul. Inside the Garden's tunnel, that friction finally ignited into a face-to-face showdown. A reminder of when the league had soul, pure gladiator energy. Men were clashing in warm-ups as if the title was at stake. The bitterness felt intimate. These feuds ran bone deep. Pierce still keeps a receipt, reminding the world LeBron needed a South Beach squad to finally break him. For the truth, those old scars haven't faded one bit. Pierce suspects the Kings' new era, tougher game agenda is no accident. He views the timing as tactical. By 2026, as young guns outpaced him, LeBron painted today as the ultimate gauntlet. To Pierce, that is just branding. He wonders why a fierce icon suddenly defends a diluted product right as Father Time starts winning the race. Doubling down, Pierce labeled today's constant defensive switching a sanctuary for the unmotivated elite. During the 90s and early aughts, drawing a superstar assignment meant you were locked in for 48 minutes. You ate every screen, took every elbow and clawed through contact, paying for every stop in blood and bruises. Now guys just point and pawn the threat off. Back then my whole body felt shattered after the final whistle. My body is screaming. This is absolute grinding physical warfare. It is pure agony. Explain why 75 games was the standard back then? Simple, we were just built different. But today, everyone just trades assignments. That is the core of Pierce's grievance. He told Danny Green that modern stats are bloated because the enforcer is an extinct species. The league killed that grit. Attempt an Oakley or Mahorn style in 2026, and you are suspended before the first snowfall. Then a total bombshell hit. On January 29th, after 21 years of dominance, LeBron's name vanished from the starting roster. Let that sink in. 2 decades of being the face of the league, and suddenly he is sidelined. For years, the King and the exhibition were inseparable. The tide finally turned. Now, Luka Doncic is hailed as the new crown jewel of Los Angeles. The fans, media, and players spoke in unison, and their final verdict was deafening. During the final Western ballot, LeBron languished in 9th place, scraping together only 3 measly media votes. Sitting at 9th overall for a man who once owned the polls feels like a deliberate eviction notice from the elite. Skeptics claim his tougher era argument is merely the final card in a shrinking hand. If the pace is so brutal, why are these guys hanging around longer than ever? In the past, stars crumbled by their early 30s, victims of a relentless, bone-crunching schedule. Modern medicine and recovery tech have gifted players longevity. That is reality, but the critics have a darker spin. They argue that staying power today is just a byproduct of a sanitized, soft-shell environment. The talk is loud. Shaq sensed the changing winds immediately during the Inside the NBA reserve picks on January 20th. He snubbed LeBron without a second thought, showing zero hesitation in his decision. Some stars only falter when their clock runs dry. Seeing the King as a second stringer is just wrong. I would rather... Wait, so you are saying he should not even be in the building? Not exactly. He tossed out, "LeBron can have my seat." It sounded charitable, but the delivery cut like a knife. That was not a compliment. It was a signal that the King's days of receiving royal favors are over. Then Sir Charles decided to turn the volume up even higher. Barkley hinted that the Hollywood chapter is closing, foreseeing a final farewell tour back in the land. I am certain of one thing. His time in purple and gold is done. He won't be in Los Angeles next season. I have always held on to the idea that he belongs in Cleveland for the grand finale. I would even back a trade to the Cavs right now. That single remark set the digital world on fire. The timing of that podcast feels orchestrated. Rehash the GOAT debate, pivot back to legacy, and distract from the current slide. Hijack the news cycle before the snub takes over. But once those numbers went public, the narrative flipped instantly. To make matters worse, the Laker royalty is not coming to his rescue. In a September 2025 sit-down, Magic Johnson crowned MJ the greatest, valuing absolute dominance over sheer endurance. That lethal edge is what makes him the ultimate predator on the court. Look, I respect the king, but Magic was blunt. Longevity is one thing, but ruling with an iron fist is quite another. For Shaq, that purple and gold armor represents a legacy far beyond mere branding or tactical media plays. It is about raw dominance. It is about soul-crushing impact. It is about rattling cages before the opening whistle even blows. So, when LeBron preaches about tempo and growth, the veterans perceive a completely different frequency. They sense the death of terror. In their universe, once that psychological edge vanishes, the kingdom begins to crumble. For Diesel, wearing the purple and gold is not employment. It is a sacred spiritual calling. He anchored the final three-peat seen from 2000 to 2002. He knows exactly what it costs to hang those banners. It was not earned through floor spacing. It was not built on viral clips or microphone chatter. It was 48 minutes of hand-to-hand combat against giants like the Spurs and Kings, specifically designed to break him. Every move was a car crash. Legends tried to bury him, forcing him to bleed for every single bucket he got. That was the tax for greatness back then. When Braun claims speed makes today tougher, Shaq hears a total lack of respect. He hears a disregard for the agonizing sweat and grit that forged those championship rings. And the big Aristotle isn't alone. The entire Laker lineage is finally reaching a breaking point. On January 28, 2026, five-time champ Ron Harper, who survived both the Bulls and Kobe eras, snapped. Harper did not feel the need for a lengthy oration or a deep dive. He sent one biting post on X. These excuses are foolish. That was it. Harper is 62 and still made of pure iron. He speaks often about battling in the starting five well past his 35th birthday, smothering superstars nightly without fancy recovery gadgets or million-dollar biohacking labs at his disposal. To those warriors, James isn't offering insight. He sounds like he is trying to edit the difficulty of the past. They see him twisting the narrative, trying to inflate his own survival stats at the expense of basketball history. That doesn't fly in Los Angeles. Fans raised on Showtime and Shaq's reign despise hearing about minor muscle tweaks. They crave blood. They want desperate energy. They want more banners hanging from the rafters. The vibe around Braun in 2026 is getting ugly. Critics claim he's managing PR while the defense rots. Like it or not, the noise is deafening. The wildest part of this whole saga is the massive paradox at play. For a decade, LeBron acted like a scholar, honoring the greats and absorbing every bit of hardwood lore. Yet, as the greatest of all time debate reaches a fever pitch, his perspective has flipped. Suddenly, the past was just a slow, talentless vacuum. The architects of the game aren't taking that sitting down, and that is exactly where the friction burns the brightest. You cannot brag about playing forever while insisting your path was harder than the icons you are trying to surpass. If rules baby modern players, fans notice. If it is truly more grueling, why are careers reaching 2 decades? The pressure is suffocating. Getting left out of the 2026 All-Star starting lineup sparked the fire. For the first time in 20 years, the King was benched for the start, a seismic shift in the hierarchy. It felt like the sport finally turned the page. Now, the argument transcends mere box scores and spreadsheets. It is about soul. It is about being feared. It is about whether greatness is found in numbers or an aura. Shaq and the old guard have picked their hill. They worship the mean streak and the physical scars. James holds the scoring throne. He owns the jewelry. His legacy is objectively ironclad and historic. Yet, to the ghosts of the past, his spirit lacks something vital. That is the heart of this war. Now, the choice belongs to you. Are you siding with the 90s headhunters, or do you embrace the high-speed digital age of the modern superstar? If this deep dive hit home, smash that like button, subscribe, and send this to your biggest basketball rival. And I will catch you in the next one. Peace.